Damn, it feels good to be a gangster.
Today, my young Padawan news, I will be teaching you the most important thing in the history of history. Total War. Prosper.
War. War never changes. Something destructive to so many, yet sacred to the human race. Something we should evaluate above all others. Now, the age of war is upon us. A war we have dubbed Total War. A war where every man, woman and child is involved. A war where the whole country is swallowed in the immolation. Part 1.
Total War. One of the most interesting facets in the mural of history. One exquisite example of Total War is the Punic Wars. Now, for a brief history of the Punic Wars, let's start chronologically and logically with the first one. While the events of the First Punic War weren't that interesting, the way it started is. So to set the stage, traditionally the Romans reigned over the land while the Carthaginians held dominance over the Mediterranean Sea. One controlled the land, and one controlled the sea. A very formidable force together. And thus, they were pretty good allies until one incident with Sicily caught them off guard. You see, a city-state attacked another, and they took different sides on the conflict, similarly to how Russia and Germany didn't agree on the Serbian debate in World War I. I guess the saying, history repeats itself, definitely applies here. As I said, the events of it weren't very interesting, as over the course of 20 years, the Romans finally built a big enough navy to destroy the Carthaginian one after many conquests, and the naval dominance kind of ended the thing. The Second Punic War is a lot more interesting than the first, because it's directly sparked when Hannibal attacked the town Saguntum under the control of the Romans. Later he had strings of successes, killing armies twice his size multiple times over, and he was just generally destroying any hope the Romans had of fighting off his menacing presence. Sadly, Hannibal's shirking didn't quite last forever. After a horrific defeat, he lost all the inertia he gained from his previous successes, and to top it off, he was called back to defend the North African coast, where the Roman general Scipio was really giving him hell. Once again, the Carthaginian fleet was destroyed. To triple top it off. Now, however, the Third Punic War was sparked when the Carthaginians decided to break one of their treaties with the Romans by attacking one of their neighbors. Quite unfortunate for them, because the Romans kind of already had a vendetta against them at the point. So the Romans went and sieged them for quite a while, and then they salted the earth, which meant that they couldn't grow any crops, and ruined the land for many years to come. And to also put the icing on the cake, they sieged them, and when they finally got in, they burned every house down, killed every civilian, and generally pillaged for 7 days straight. At the end of it all, 50,000 civilians were left alive. They sold them into slavery. Isn't that total war?
Part 2.
A series of uprisings in the mid-1800s posed a serious threat to the survival of the Qing dynasty. The Taiping Rebellion, which lasted from 1850 to 1864, was one of the bloodiest battles with about 20 million deaths, including civilians and soldiers. The Taipings were a religious group that combined Christian beliefs and ancient Chinese ideas. The Taipings challenged Confucianism and the Qing dynasty with the program that divided the land equally among people. In the Taiping Rebellion, almost every citizen received military training and participated in the war. The army contained about 500,000 soldiers. Also, both sides used scorched earth tactics. Scorched earth tactics are tactics that involve one side destroying what is useful to the other side and withdrawing or advancing from the area. This resulted in a massive civilian death toll with about 600 cities destroyed.
Part 3.
The American Civil War. It was one of the most bloodiest war in American history. It was between the North, the Unions, and the South, the Confederacy. It killed more than 620,000 men and injured millions more. Prior to 1864, the Unions and Confederacy leaders considered it as a limited war due to destruction only happening in the battlefield without any damage to civilian or any private property. But this led to an endless battle, which later President Lincoln and General Sherman decided to open it up as a total war, which means nobody is innocent. They would destroy everything that stands in front of them in order to win the war. Beginning September 21st, 1864, the Union General Sheridan marched his army to Shenandoah Valley to eliminate the South's food sources. Sheridan's technique was a success because the South was too weak to defend them. The major attack on the South finally led the Union forces to take undisputed control over the region.
Part 4.
One example of this was the Commando Law passed by Nazi Germany. This law stated that any special forces members captured by the Germans were to be executed immediately. Another thing they did was they would capture prisoners of war and force them to work in their factories to build tanks and other vehicles for the Nazi war machine. Similarly, the Soviets sent their factory workers to the Ural Mountains to continue building tanks as the German army marched forward. As the war in the Pacific raged on, the U.S., desperate for a victory, started unrestricted firebombing of Japanese cities. Also, towards the end of the war, they resorted to using 2 atomic bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, forcing Japan to surrender.